After saying goodbye to Madge, Brian mounted his horse and rode slowly away in the moonlight. He felt very happy. Oh, yes, they would live on the ocean, and she would find how much pleasanter it was on the restless waters, with their solemn sense of mystery, than on the crowded land. He would put the secret behind his back, and would wander about the world with Madge and her father. He felt a sudden chill come over him. "I'm a fool," he thought as he gathered up the reins and spurred his horse into a canter. "It can make no difference to me so long as Madge remains ignorant. But to sit beside him, to eat with him, to have him always present like a skeleton at a feast, God help me." He urged his horse into a gallop, and as he rushed over the turf with the fresh, cool night wind blowing keenly against his face, he felt a sense of relief, as though he were leaving some dark spectre behind. On he galloped, with the blood throbbing in his young veins, over miles of plain, with the dark blue, star-studded sky above, and the pale moon shining down on him. On, ever on, until his own homestead appeared. A groom, roused by the clatter of hoofs up the avenue, came round the side of the house, and Brian leapt off his horse, and, flinging the reins to the man, walked into his own room. There he found a lighted lamp, brandy on the table, and a packet of letters and newspapers. He opened the window and door so as to let in the cool breeze. Then, mixing for himself a glass of brandy and soda, he turned up the lamp and prepared to read his letters. The first he took up was from a lady, but after reading half a page of small talk and scandal, he flung it on the table with an impatient ejaculation. The other letters were principally business ones, but the last proved to be from Colton, and Fitzgerald opened it with a sensation of pleasure. The lawyer was a capital letter-writer. "My dear Fitzgerald, I suppose you still hold the secret which Rosanna Moore entrusted you with? Ah, you see, I know her name. How? Simply because, with the natural curiosity of the human race, I have been trying to find out who murdered Oliver White, and as Rosanna Moore was likely to be at the bottom of the whole affair, I have been learning her past history. In the first place, I discovered from Roger Morland, who, if you remember, was a witness against you at the trial, that White and Rosanna Moore had come out from England to Sydney together about a year ago, travelling as Mr. and Mrs. White. I telegraphed home to England to a friend of mine who was a bit of an amateur detective, and, mirabile dictu, he found out all about her. It appears, however, that the task I set him was easier than I expected, for the so-called Mrs. White was rather a notorious individual in her own way. She was a burlesque actress at the Frivolity Theatre in London, and being a very handsome woman had been photographed innumerable times. Consequently, when she very foolishly went with White to choose a berth on board the boat, she was recognized by the clerks in the office as Rosanna Moore, better known as Musette of the Frivolity. Why she ran away from England I cannot tell you. Perhaps Musette got weary of St. John's Wood and champagne suppers, and longed for the purer air of her own land. Ah, yes, she was a native of Australia, and indeed before she left these shores for England was celebrated on the stages of Melbourne. Why she chose White to come home with puzzles me. He was not rich, not particularly good-looking, had no position, and a bad temper. How do I know all these traits of Mr. White's character, morally and socially? Easily enough. My omniscient friend found them all out. Musette, I may tell you, had one special vice, a common one, drink. She loved champagne and drank a good deal of it. Consequently, on arriving at Melbourne and finding that a new generation had arisen which did not know her, she drowned her sorrows in the flowing bowl. One night, after a quarrel with Mr. White, she went out to view Melbourne after darkness had fallen. A familiar scene to her, no doubt. What took her to Little Burke Street, I don't know. Perhaps she got lost, perhaps it had been a favourite walk of hers in the old days. At all events, she was found dead drunk in that unsavoury locality by the slum girl, Sal Rawlins. Sal acted the part of the Good Samaritan. She took her to the squalid den she called home, and there Rosanna Moore fell dangerously ill. When White found out where she was and that she was too ill to be removed, he went back to his lodgings at St. Kilda. but he did not break off his connection with the dying woman, visiting her many times. Then, one night, he is murdered in a hansom cab, and that same night Rosanna Moore dies. Now then, have I not found out a good deal? And do you still decline to reveal the rest? I do not say you know who killed White, but I do say you know sufficient to lead to the detection of the murderer. If you tell me, so much the better, both for your own sense of justice and for your peace of mind. If you do not, well, I shall find out everything without you. With kind regards to yourself, I remain yours very truly, Duncan Colton. When Fitzgerald had finished the last of the closely written sheets, he let the letter fall from his hands and stared blankly into the growing light outside. "I can do no more," he said to himself, leaning his head against the wall of the house. "There is only one way of stopping Colton, and that is by telling him all. My poor Madge. My poor Madge." A soft wind arose and rustled among the trees, and there appeared great shafts of crimson light in the east. Then, with a sudden blaze, the sun peered over the brim of the wide plain. The warm yellow rays touched lightly the comely head of the weary man, and turning round he held up his arms to the great luminary as though he were a fire-worshipper. "I accept the omen of the dawn, for her life and for mine." His resolution taken, Brian did not let the grass grow under his feet, but rode over in the afternoon to tell Madge of his intended departure. "I received a letter last night," he said, turning his face away from her, "and as it's about some important business, I must start for Melbourne at once." "I don't think it will be long before we follow. Papa leaves here at the end of the week." "Why?" "Well, I'm sure I don't know. He's so restless, and never seems to settle down to anything. He says for the rest of his life he is going to do nothing but wander all over the world." There suddenly flashed across Fitzgerald's mind a line from Genesis, which seemed singularly applicable to Mr. Frettlby. "A fugitive and a vagabond thou shalt be in the earth." Everyone gets these restless fits sooner or later. In fact, I believe I'm in one myself. Then Mr. Frettlby entered the house from the veranda, where he had been in conversation with Dr. Chinston. "Fitzgerald, I am glad to see you here again." "I do certainly let you know I'm living, don't I?" replied Brian, his face flushing as he reluctantly took the millionaire's proffered hand. "But the fact is, I've come to say goodbye for a few days." "Ah, going back to town, I suppose. I don't know that you're wise, exchanging the clear air of the country for that dusty atmosphere." "Yet Madge tells me you are going back." "Depends upon circumstances. I may and I may not." "You go on business, I presume?" "Well, the fact is, Carlton—" Here Brian stopped suddenly and bit his lip with vexation, for he had not intended to mention the lawyer's name. "Yes?" Mr. Frettlby looked keenly at Brian. "Wants to see me on business." The two men looked at one another steadily for a moment, and in that short space of time a single name flashed through their brains: the name of Rosanna Moore. The lovers moved out onto the veranda, leaving Frettlby alone. He shivered for a moment in the heat, as though it had grown suddenly chill. Dr. Chinston entered, and Frettlby took his arm. "I want you to come up to my study, Doctor, and examine me." "Why, don't you feel well?" "Not lately. I'm afraid I've got heart disease." The doctor looked sharply at him and then shook his head. "Nonsense. It's a common delusion with people that they have heart disease, and in 9 cases out of 10 it's all imagination." Chinston made an examination of Mark Frettlby, and when he had finished his face was very grave, though he laughed at the millionaire's fears. "You're all right. Action of the heart a little weak, that's all. Only avoid excitement. Yes, avoid excitement. Just as Frettlby was putting on his coat, a knock came to the door, and Madge entered.
Brian is gone, and... Oh, I beg your pardon, Doctor. Is Papa ill?
No, child, no, said Frettlby hastily. I'm all right. I thought my heart was affected, but it isn't. Not a bit of it, answered Chinston. You're all right. Only avoid excitement. But Madge, who had her eyes fixed on the doctor's face, saw how grave it was. She waited until her father had departed from the room, then addressed the medical man.
There is danger.
No. No.
Yes, there is. Tell me the worst. It is best for me to know.
The doctor looked at her in some doubt for a few moments, and then placed his hand on her shoulder. My dear young lady, I will tell you what I have not dared to tell your father. His heart is affected.
And there is great danger?
Yes, great danger. In the event of any sudden shock...
Yes?
He would probably drop down dead. Mr. Colton sat in his office reading a letter he had just received from Fitzgerald, and judging from the complacent smile upon his face, it seemed to give him the greatest satisfaction. I know, wrote Brian, that now you have taken up the affair you will not stop until you find out everything. So, as I want the matter to rest as at present, I will anticipate you and reveal all. I will call at your office sometime next week, and then you will learn everything that Rosanna Moore told me. But once you are possessed of that knowledge, you will pity me. Most extraordinary, mused Colton, leaning back in his chair. Here a knock came to the door, and in answer to an invitation to enter, it opened, and the detective Kilsip glided into the room. "You're not engaged, sir?" "Oh, dear, no. Come in, come in." Kilsip closed the door softly, and, gliding along in his usual velvet-footed manner, sat down in a chair near Colton's. Placing his hat on the ground, he looked keenly at the barrister. "Well, Kilsip, and what have you come to see me about?" "The Hansom Cab murder." The lawyer was startled out of his professional dignity. "The deuce! And have you found out who did it?" "No, but I have an idea." "And to whom does your suspicion point?" Kilsip looked round cautiously as if to make sure they were alone, and then said in a stage whisper, "Roger Morland." "The young man that gave evidence as to how White got drunk?" Kilsip nodded. "Well, how do you connect him with the murder?" "Do you remember the evidence given by the cabmen Royston and Rankin? They both swore that the man who got into the cab with White wore a diamond ring on the forefinger of the right hand." "What of that? Nearly every second man in Melbourne wears a diamond ring." "But not on the forefinger of the right hand." "Ah. And Morland wears a ring in that way?" "Yes." The lawyer was unimpressed. "Merely a coincidence. Is that all your proof?" "All I can obtain at present." "It's very weak." "The weakest proofs may form a chain to hang a man." Colton rose and paced the room. "But why should Morland murder White? What motive had he?" "That document." "Pshaw! That was just an idea of Gorby's. How do you know there was any document?" The fact is, Colton did not intend Kilsip to know that White really had carried a document until he heard what Fitzgerald had to tell him. When Kilsip did not answer, Colton resumed his walk. "How do you know about Morland's ring?" "The fact is, Morland is employed as a barman in the Kangaroo Hotel." "A barman? And he came out here as a gentleman of independent fortune. Hang it, man, that in itself proves that he had no motive to murder White. Morland pretty well lived off White. So what could have induced him to kill his golden goose and become a barman? The idea is absurd." "Well, you may be right. I don't pretend to be infallible. But at all events, when I saw Morland in the bar, he wore a silver ring on the forefinger of his right hand. Silver isn't a diamond. No, but it shows that that was the finger he was accustomed to wear his ring on. When I saw that, I determined to search his room. I managed to do so while he was out, and found...
A mare's nest?
nothing.
And so your castle of cards falls to the ground. Your idea is absurd.
Morland no more committed the murder than I did.
Why, he was too drunk on that night to do anything.
I'm sure that Morland was not drunk on that night. He only said so to escape awkward questions as to his movements. Depend upon it, he knows more than he lets out. Well, how do you intend to set about the matter? I shall start looking for the coat first.
Ah, you think he has hidden it?
I am sure of it. My theory is this. When Morland got out of that cab at Powlett Street, he turned to the left down George Street and walked back to town through the Fitzroy Gardens. There, knowing that the coat was noticeable, he threw it away, or rather hid it. I intend to look for the coat in the Fitzroy Gardens.
Phew! A wild goose chase.
Possibly. And he rose to go. "And when shall I see you again?" asked Colton. "Oh, tonight." Kilsip paused at the door. "I had nearly forgotten. Mother Guttersnipe wants to see you. I'm to take you to her."
"Why? What's up?"
"She wants to tell you some secret."
"She does?
Why, I wonder?" "Because she's dying." That evening at 8 o'clock, Kilsip called at the lawyer's office in order to guide him through the squalid labyrinths of the slums. In a short time they found themselves in Little Burke Street, and after traversing a few dark and narrow lanes, by this time they were more or less familiar to Colton, they stood before Mother Guttersnipe's den. They climbed the rickety stairs, which groaned and creaked beneath their weight, and found the old woman lying on the bed in the corner. The elfish, black-haired child called Liza was playing cards with a slatternly-looking girl at a deal table by the faint light of a tallow candle. They both sprang to their feet as the strangers entered, and the elfish child pushed a broken chair in a sullen manner towards Mr. Colton, while the other girl shuffled into a far corner of the room and crouched down there like a dog. The noise of their entry awoke the hag from an uneasy slumber. She presented such a gruesome spectacle that involuntarily Colton recoiled. Her white hair was unbound, and hung in tangled masses over her shoulders in snowy profusion. Her face, parched and wrinkled, with the hooked nose and beady black eyes like those of a mouse, was poked forward, and her skinny arms, bare to the shoulder, were waving wildly about as she grasped at the bedclothes with her claw-like hands. The square bottle and the broken cup lay beside her, and filling herself a dram, she lapped it up greedily. The irritant brought on a paroxysm of coughing, which lasted until the elfish child shook her well and took the cup from her. "Greedy old beast," muttered this amiable infant, peering into the cup. "You'd drink the Yarra River dry." Kilsip stepped forward. "None of this." Taking Liza by one thin shoulder, he pushed her over to where the other girl was crouching. "Stop there till I tell you to move." Meanwhile, Colton was addressing himself to the old woman in the corner. "You wanted to see me?" He spoke gently, for notwithstanding his repugnance to her, she was, after all, a woman, and dying.
"Yes, Cassia. You ain't a parson?"
"No, I am a lawyer."
"I ain't a-going to have the cussy parsons a-prowling round here. I ain't a-going to die yet, Cassie. I'm going to get well and strong and have a good time of it."
"I'm afraid you won't recover. You had better let me send for a doctor."
"No, I shan't,"
retorted the hag, aiming a blow at him with all her feeble strength.
"I ain't a-going to have my inside spoiled with salt and senna. I don't want neither parsons nor doctors, I don't."
"Very well. What is it you wanted to see me about?"
"Don't be in such a hurry, or I'm blamed if I tell you anything, so help me."
She was evidently growing very weak, so Colton turned to Kilsip and told him in a whisper to get a doctor. The detective scribbled a note on some paper, and giving it to Liza, ordered her to take it. At this the other girl arose, and putting her arm in that of the child, they left together.
"Them two young hussies gone. Right you are. For I don't want what I've got to tell to get into the newspaper, I don't."
"And what is it?" asked Colton, bending forward. The old woman took another drink of gin, and it seemed to put life into her.
"You've been here afore."
She pointed one skinny finger at Colton.
"You wanted to find out all about her as died, but you didn't. She wouldn't let me tell, for she was always a proud jade, a-flouncing round while her poor mother was a-starving."
"Her mother? Are you Rosanna Moore's mother?"
"May I die if I ain't."
She peered again at the lawyer.
"You weren't about town in the old days, or you'd have been after her yourself, Cassie."
"After Rosanna?"
"The worry girl. She were on the stage, she were, and my eye, what a swell she were, with all the coves a-dying for her, and she dancing over their black arts, cuss 'em. But she was always good to me till he came."
"Till who came?"
"He."
The old woman raised herself on her skinny arms, her eyes sparkling with vindictive fury.
"He. A-coming round with his diamonds and his gold, and ruining my poor girl. How he's held his blooming head up all these years as if he were a saint, I don't know. Cuss him. Cuss him."
"Whom does she mean?" whispered Colton to Kilsip.
"Mean?"
Mother Guttersnipe's sharp ears had caught the muttered question.
"Why, Mark Frettleby." "Good God!"
Colton rose up in his astonishment, and even Kilsip's inscrutable countenance displayed some surprise.
"Aye, they were a swell in them days. And he comes a-philandering round my girl, cuss him, and ruins her, and leaves her and the child to starve."
"There was a child? What was her name?"
"Tchah! As if you didn't know my granddaughter, Sal."
"Sal Rawlins is Mark Frettleby's daughter?"
"Yes, and as pretty a girl as the other one, her half-sister, even if she did happen to be born on the wrong side of the hedge."
Exhausted by the effort she had made, the old woman sank back in her bed while Colton sat dazed, thinking over the astounding revelation that had just been made. That Rosanna Moore should turn out to be Mark Frettleby's mistress he hardly wondered at. After all, the millionaire was but a man, and in his young days had been no better and no worse than the rest of his friends. Colton did not think any the worse of Frettleby for his youthful follies, but what did surprise him was that Frettleby should be so heartless as to leave his child to the tender mercies of an old hag like Mother Guttersnipe. It was so entirely different from what he knew of the man that he was inclined to think the old woman was playing him a trick. Then he was struck by a sudden thought. Did Mr. Frettleby know Sal was his child?
"Not he. He thought she was dead, he did, after Rosanna give him the go-by."
"And why did you not tell him?"
"'Cause I wanted to break his heart, if he had any. Sal was a-going wrong as fast as she could. If she'd gone and got into prison, then I'd have gone to him and said, 'Look at your daughter. I've ruined her as you did mine.'"
Carlton was revolted at the malignity of the scheme. "You wicked woman! You sacrificed an innocent girl for this?"
"None of your preaching. I ain't been brought up for a saint, I ain't."
Suddenly she laid her hand on the pillow.
"He paid me well to hold me tongue about my daughter."
"Mark Frettleby gave you money?"
"To guard his precious high and mighty name, cuss him. I've got it here. All gold, good gold, and mine, cuss me."
Colton rose. He felt quite sick at this exhibition of human depravity and longed to be away. As he was putting on his hat, however, the two girls entered with the doctor. The man nodded to Kilsip, cast a sharp, scrutinizing glance at Colton, and then walked over to the bed. Mother Guttersnipe opened her eyes.
"Who's you? Get out."
but then she seemed to grasp the situation again, and she started up with a yell which made the hearers shudder.
My money!
She clasped the pillow in her skinny arms.
It's all mine. You shan't have it, Gussie.
The doctor arose from his knees and shrugged his shoulders. Not worthwhile doing anything. She'll be dead soon. The old woman, mumbling over her pillow, caught the word and burst into tears.
Dead? Dead? No, I ain't fit to die, Gussie. Save me, save me. I don't know where I'd go to help me. Save me.
And she clawed at the doctor's sleeves. The doctor tried to remove her hands, but she held on with wonderful tenacity. "It is impossible," he said.
"I'll give you money to save me. Good money, all mine, all mine. See, here. Sovereigns."
And tearing her pillow open, she took out a canvas bag, and from it poured a gleaming stream of gold. Gold, gold. It rolled all over the bed, over the floor, away into the dark corners, yet no one touched it. So enchained were they by the horrible spectacle of the dying woman clinging to life. She clutched some of the shining pieces and held them up to the three men as they stood silently beside the bed. But her hands so trembled that sovereigns kept falling from them onto the floor with metallic clinks.
"All mine! All mine! Give me my life! Gold, money, Gussie! I sold my soul for it. Save me! Give me my life!"
With trembling hands she tried to force the gold on them. They said no word, but stood silently looking at her, while the two girls in the corner clung together and trembled with fear.
"Don't look at me! Don't!"
She fell down again amid the shining gold.
"You want me to die? I shan't. I shan't. Give me my gold."
Clawing at the scattered sovereigns.
"I'll take it with me. I shan't die. God! God! I ain't done nothing. Let me live. Give me Bible. Save me. God! Cuss it. God! God!"
She fell back on the bed, a corpse. The faint light of the candle flickered on the shining gold and on the dead face framed in tangled white hair, while the three men, sick at heart, turned away in silence.